Tonight, General Motors heads down a one-way street to bankruptcy with a push from its investors. But the White House says it's not giving up hope. I'm Katie Couric. Also tonight, Republicans walking a tightrope over a Supreme Court nomination. How to express their concerns over Sonia Sotomayor without alienating Hispanic voters. The ripple effects of recession, from a boat dealer in Florida to the wineries of California, as we continue our series, The Financial Family Tree. And the battle for life-saving dollars, why research into some of the deadliest forms of cancer gets the least government funding.
This is the CBS Evening News with Katie Couric.
Good evening, everyone. General Motors is just 5 days away from a deadline for restructuring and avoiding bankruptcy. But tonight, bankruptcy seems all but inevitable after GM failed to reach a deal with bondholders who hold $27 billion in company debt. American taxpayers have already invested $20 billion to try to rescue GM. Today, the New York Times quoted sources as saying it would take at least $50 billion more to get the company through Chapter 11. So, whether you like it or not, taxpayers, it looks like you're about to buy GM. Here's Anthony Mason.
By next week, General Motors will be a government-owned company. A new restructuring plan would give taxpayers as much as a 70% stake in the new GM.
Government's intervention here at this largest scale with a private company is certainly unprecedented.
GM's employees have signed off on the revised deal. The United Auto Workers, which initially was offered 39% of the company, has agreed to accept 17.5% and a seat on the board. The White House says bankruptcy can still be averted.
The deadline is near, but it's not passed.
But the bondholders who own $27 billion worth of GM's debt have overwhelmingly rejected a buyout offer that would have given them just 10% of a restructured company they wanted to control.
So bottom line, what do you think of this offer?
Where's the garbage can?
Jim Modica, a retired financial bookkeeper, and his wife Margaret,
It's been really a tough day, huh?
invested almost all their retirement money, more than $700,000, in GM bonds.
I did the math, and on my bonds, General Motors stock would have to go to $329 per share for me to just break out even without any interest.
That's a long way to go. GM stock closed today at $1.15.
It would be a family tragedy for us if this thing goes down the drain.
Because Jim's brother also bought GM bonds. Mark Modica, who manages a Pennsylvania Saturn dealership, believes bankruptcy would be a disaster for the economy, too.
You hear about these green shoots, and I feel a GM bankruptcy right now is a giant lawnmower. You can forget those green shoots.
But the White House appears to be driving GM straight towards Chapter 11.
The government is a gigantic hand in these proceedings, and so they are certainly pushing through, and some would argue trampling the rights of some investors and dealerships.
The union isn't getting off easy either. The UAW has agreed to more worker buyouts and to reduce costly retiree health care benefits immediately. General Motors is expected to file for bankruptcy by Monday. Katie?
And Anthony, what about GM warranties and repair obligations? Will the government back those up?
It's expected to, Katie. The government effectively will provide the financing for this deal. They will be the new owner of GM, and they're the ones who are going to be standing behind the warranties now.
All right. Anthony Mason. Anthony, thanks so much. Meanwhile, lawyers for Chrysler spent this day in bankruptcy court trying to get a judge to approve a deal that will have the Italian automaker Fiat buy most of the company's assets. Chrysler workers, bondholders, and dealers are trying to block that deal, saying it hurts them. But if the judge approves, Chrysler could emerge from bankruptcy in just a few weeks. In other news, President Obama's Supreme Court nominee spent today working the phones. Judge Sonia Sotomayor spoke with Senate leaders from both parties. When confirmation hearings begin this summer, Republicans are promising a close examination of her judicial record. At the same time, Sandra Hughes reports they'll try not to alienate Hispanic voters.
I nominated a brilliant individual to serve on the United States Supreme Court, Judge Sonia Sotomayor.
A standing ovation for President Obama, who made his first trip to the swing state of Nevada after nominating Judge Sotomayor. All across America, Hispanics are reacting to Sotomayor's nomination.
I thought it's about time. Just like Obama was way overdue, we're overdue.
It's motivation and inspiration to, the Latino community.
No one is more proud than the nominee's mother. Selena Sotomayor returned to Miami today after her daughter told the world Mom was her driving force.
Oh my God, I'm so proud of her. Oh, I never thought that she would. Well, I always know what she was, but what she accomplished, I had no words.
Juan Ramirez is also proud. He owns a bakery and restaurant in East Los Angeles.
A lot of Hispanics changed from Republican to Democrat. I'm one of them.
He supported President Obama for just this kind of decision.
Nobody can say she's not qualified to be on the Supreme Court.
While some Republicans are being measured in responding to the nomination, others are already voicing loud objections.
She's not the brain that they're portraying her to be. She's not a constitutional jurist. She is an affirmative action case extraordinaire.
Criticism is also rising over her remarks in a speech made in 2001. I would hope that a wise Latina woman with the richness of her experiences would more often than not reach a better conclusion than a white male who hasn't lived that life. Newt Gingrich tweeted today, "Imagine a judicial nominee said, 'My experience as a white man makes me better than a Latina woman. Latina woman racist should withdraw.'"
There's the potential that Republican opposition to the nomination will reinforce the feeling that this is a party not sympathetic to Hispanics, maybe potentially even hostile to Hispanics.
It wasn't always that way. In 2000 and again in 2004, George Bush wooed Hispanics with promises of immigration reform, but he couldn't convince his own party to get with the reform program. In 2008, GOP presidential candidate John McCain paid the price, even though he also supported immigration reform. President Obama carried 67% of the Latino vote. McCain got only 31%, down from President Bush's 44%. But one Supreme Court nomination doesn't get President Obama a free ride with Latino voters. He promised immigration reform, too.
There is a sense of edginess about, wait a minute, I mean, you made this promise and now you're backing off. Potentially, this nomination buys him a little time.
But he'll need to keep courting this critical group, already 45 million strong and the fastest growing voting bloc in the country. Sandra Hughes, CBS News, Los Angeles.
Now, pundits usually label judges as either liberal or conservative, but that won't be easy with Judge Sotomayor. Wyatt Andrews takes a closer look at her paper trail.
Behind the applause for her personal achievements, it turns out Sonia Sotomayor has been a very unpredictable judge. For example, pro-abortion rights groups worried aloud today that the president, who promised an abortion rights nominee, never asked Sotomayor, who is Catholic, where she stands.
We simply don't know Judge Sotomayor's view on the bedrock constitutional case of Roe versus Wade.
At the Center for Reproductive Rights, the judge is widely presumed to favor abortion rights. But in 2002, she allowed the Bush administration to block federal funds for abortions overseas. The government, she wrote, is free to favor the anti-abortion position.
We were sorry that we lost it, but Judge Sotomayor felt that she was tied in by precedent.
There is a race going on now in Washington to slap some political label on the judge. Conservative groups worry that the judge's own words, that a wise Latina woman can reach a better conclusion than a white male, prove she will always favor minorities.
Equal justice under law or under attack.
But liberal groups are pushing her personal story.
I will seek somebody who is dedicated to the rule of law.
To suggest that she will be a liberal, using the law to help real people. Tom Goldstein, who runs a neutral Supreme Court blog, says they are all wrong.
her rulings don't just run down the left side of the aisle.
Goldstein, who has studied all 400 of Sotomayor's opinions, says she leans liberal, but has often ruled against minorities and for employers in cases of discrimination.
So there's a real air of mystery about some of the big hot-button social issues that we all care about.
President Obama then has found a judge with 17 years experience but no clear ideology on discrimination, gay rights, or abortion, and who can't be easily defined by political labels. Wyatt Andrews, CBS News at the Supreme Court.
Meanwhile, the man who replaced Barack Obama in the Senate could be in big trouble. The Ethics Committee is investigating how Roland Burris got his job. Burris denies offering money to then Illinois Governor Rod Blagojevich to appoint him. But that seems to be contradicted by a November phone call to the governor's brother, secretly taped by the FBI and made public today. In it, Burris discusses ways of donating to the governor's campaign, but worries that it might appear that he was buying the appointment.
God knows, number one, I want to help Rod. Number two, I also want to, hope I can into consideration to get that appointment. That will get out, and people say, oh, Burris is doing a fundraiser, and then Rod and I are both going to catch hell.
Burris was also heard offering to make a donation in the name of a business partner, but today he repeated his denial, insisting he never offered money for his appointment. Coming up next, how declining boat sales in Florida leads to slower wine sales in California. Our special series, Financial Family Tree. The recession is now in its 18th month, the longest since World War II, and it's affecting just about everyone in some way. In our series Financial Family Tree, we've shown you how falling demand for boats affects the Florida dealer, the boat builder, the parts supplier, the parts maker, the fiberglass manufacturer in Chicago, and the landscaper and the restaurant owner in Wisconsin. But it doesn't end there. Tonight, John Blackstone picks up the story in California wine country.
At the Twin Oaks Country Inn in Wilmot, Wisconsin, they're not selling as much of their house wine from Fetzer Vineyards in California, where Mike Herring admits falling restaurant sales have him over a barrel.
The barrels we want stacked because we'll use it for the next harvest.
But in Fetzer's warehouse, unsold cases are already towering. So it's going to stack up even higher.
It's going to keep going.
Fetzer's early adoption of solar power and other energy-saving measures are helping their bottom line. Still, the numbers aren't good.
We're down, let's say, 6% from where we were, or what we had expected to do, and that's equivalent to over 2.5 million bottles.
2.5 million fewer bottles sold means less of everything.
It impacts what glass we need, what labels we need, how much fruit.
So many impacts, it creates two branches in our tree. The first branch leads to Butch Cameron. He owns a fleet of 50 trucks that move wine for Fetzer and other California wineries.
Our revenues are probably down 40% from where they were last year, which is, for us, it's into the millions.
About $2 million less this year. He's slashed his workforce from 60 to 25.
We could see it coming, one guy, then the next guy.
Miguel Contreras is the only full-time mechanic left, and he'll lose $10,000 in overtime this year.
Still nervous because you never know what's going to happen with the economy.
The other branch leads to Jim Cottle and his wife, Shar. So you've been here 8 or 9 years, and
we have, and raise horses.
He's an executive recently laid off by the Fetzer Winery's parent company.
Didn't want to get the notice, didn't expect the notice, and it obviously turns your world upside down a little bit.
At their comfortable home in Northern California's wine country, a new Colt brings joy, but they have plenty of challenges.
Obviously, it's not just my job that has disappeared. Half my 401k's disappeared. My house has gone down in value.
Cottle will say only that his salary was in 6 figures, an amount hard to match in this economy.
The first conversation we had was, do we want to fight to stay here? And it doesn't take much to look around and say, oh yeah, we want to fight to stay here.
We both kind of went, put on the brakes all the way around.
Putting on the brakes includes dropping plans to enter horse shows that can cost $2,000.
She is material to go on to the Nationals, but we won't be going.
They'll no longer pay trainer Patty Bellinger $400 a month. She's lost so many clients, she can barely cover expenses.
I probably put in the bank about $60 a week.
Teaching kids about horses helps keep her afloat, but she can't spend anything on gear.
This one here, it's a Crosby saddle, about $2,500.
The stirrups come with it? $2,500?
No, separate.
When she can't buy gear, that certainly impacts Martin Cohen.
That lets you put the stirrup through this device here.
He expects sales of his $180 patented stirrups to fall from $250,000 last year to $125,000.
This year we have the pullback.
A 50% pullback that's hitting a factory where the stirrups are made, far away in China. John Blackstone, CBS News, Seaside, California.
And next week, we take you to that Chinese factory as those slow boat sails on the Gulf Coast of Florida now ripple all the way across the Pacific as we continue our special series, Financial Family Tree. Meanwhile, coming up next, questions about cancer research, why some of the deadliest forms of the disease get less funding. There's some good news tonight in the battle against cancer in this country. A new study says 650,000 cancer deaths were avoided between 1990 and 2005. Death rates fell 19% for men and 11% for women. The reasons include early detection and more research. But when it comes to funding that research, Dr. John LaPook tells us not all cancers are treated equally.
Amy Schoner loves her life as a new mother. But a year ago, she took on another role when her father, Edward, was diagnosed with cancer of the esophagus.
When a doctor looks in your face and says, you know, your father has a year to live, and the treatment options are small, and I'm not a doctor, and I'm not someone that can go out and research a cure personally, what can I do?
What she does is spend all her spare time raising awareness of her father's disease, one of the country's fastest growing and least funded cancers.
Until we get some attention and some dollars for research, we're going to be exactly where we are now. It's going to keep growing.
A CBS analysis of data released today by the American Cancer Society reveals a large disparity in funding for different types of cancer. After analyzing the number of people who die from cancer, it was found that the most federal research dollars are spent on cancer of the cervix and breast and on Hodgkin lymphoma. The least funded are cancers of the stomach, lung, and esophagus. One reason for the disparity? Some advocacy groups, like for breast cancer, are more adept at raising awareness. And with awareness comes cash.
It's clear that some of the gender-related cancers are very effective at raising funding for research.
Any specific complaints? Are you eating?
28-year-old Andrew Lesser is feeling the effects of this inequity. He's battling esophageal cancer, which gets just a tiny slice of the cancer research pie.
Certain ones get more attention, get more funding, they know more about them, like this. So, still kind of an unknown.
Officials at the National Cancer Institute told me today they're not getting enough grant proposals for research into cancers of the esophagus, stomach, and pancreas. And they're encouraging applications, Katie.
And John, if there are not that many survivors, there's not a built-in advocacy group, so that's something to consider as well.
That's true.
John LaPook, John, thank you so much. And this footnote, proceeds from Stand Up to Cancer, a special broadcast on CBS, ABC, and NBC in September, were distributed today to cancer research dream teams all across the country. More than $73 million will go to 5 teams researching 9 different types of cancer. The teams represent a collaboration of more than 20 leading research institutions. Organizers say their goal is to speed up the development of new treatments and diagnostic tests, giving cancer patients more options and more hope. We'll be right back. In his farewell address, General Douglas MacArthur famously told Congress, "Old soldiers never die, they just fade away." But what about an old warship? Kelly Cobiella shows us what happened off Key West, Florida.
What do you do with a 523-foot rusty old warship that's outlived its time? In this case, you sink it. That's the USNS Vandenberg you see going down.
1 minute 45 seconds, a new world record.
Before long, it'll look something like this, an artificial reef, underwater playground for divers and fish. Artificial reefs are a growth industry. You can swim through old subway cars off the coast of South Carolina and snorkel up to a concrete margarita bar near Miami Beach. But they don't always work out as planned. These tires dumped off the coast of Fort Lauderdale to attract fish created a dead zone instead. The Navy is still removing them. This ship is meant to stay at the bottom.
We think this is really going to be a home run for both our environment and our economy down here.
It cost more than $8 million to clean and sink the Vandenberg. Locals both above and below water are hoping it pays. Kelly Kobiella, CBS News, Miami.
And finally tonight, there is breaking news from Riverdale. We have just learned Archie has proposed to Veronica, choosing her over Betty in what has to be the longest-running love triangle in comic book history. Veronica plans to ask Betty, though, to be her maid of honor, and Archie has chosen Jughead as his best man. Congratulations, Archie and Veronica, and our condolences to Betty. That's the news and the funnies. I'm Katie Couric. Thanks for watching. I'll see you tomorrow. Good night.